Hey, 金流, 你好.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
How are you this morning?
Fine. So have you had breakfast yet?
I had a coffee.
So not
really.
biscuits, right?
No.
So yeah.
This is for me?
Yeah, all for you.
Why?
Yeah. Actually, I bought too much breakfast
You bought too much that you could eat?
And I can't handle it. What a waste.
Yeah, I know. You know what? There has been so much going on these days. There has been a national campaign against food waste. Have you heard about it? You know what? I'll show you something. If our friend, our photographer, can pan to this, there, believe it or not, over 820 million people
suffer from hunger.
Suffer from hunger these days, and as you're aware, there has been a national campaign of anti-food waste.
Oh my God, it's really hard work.
I
think
I'm relatively well fed. This can be for somebody else.
Yeah, and I heard that you will just use some points to explain to this topic, right?
Yeah, actually, this being thrifty, this being frugal, this culture goes way back. And there are many Chinese poems talking about this. I'll read you one of them that says, 春种一棵树，秋收万颗子，四海无闲田，农夫犹饿死.
Wow, so can you just
roughly it says, as one seed is planted in spring, 10,000 crops are harvested in the autumn. Even the farmers work so hard in the field, no field unturned. They're persisting and persevering and getting us what we can eat.
Wow, it's really hard work.
Yeah, I know. A lot to talk about today. Chief among them, the anti-food waste campaign.
Yeah, I think we were not supposed to waste the food. The farmers work for a whole year.
Yeah, and also some people are really in need of this. It can be a cookie, it can be some energy bars, it can be anything. I mean, I think there are more people who are in more urgent need of this than you and me.
Wow. Yeah, and I heard that you will emphasize this topic by another poem into this program.
Yeah, and I'll read you some more Chinese poems.
Wow, really looking forward to it.
In Chinese and in English.
Wow, really looking forward to it.
Good to see you, Tina.
See you later.
Yeah. Welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Liu Xin. In this series, we dissect stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to my guests to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join us in real time by sending us your comments and your questions via the CGTN webpage on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. If you're watching this live on CGTN app, email us at thepoint with alex@cgtn.com. Let me know what you think. That's important. We start our live streaming every Friday at 11 a.m. Beijing time. Get in touch, and we might just read out your comments like we do right now. Facebook user Anthony Allison says, I was in China during the lockdown. It was a swift, sudden, and a total lockdown that everyone was willing and happy to cooperate with for themselves, their family, community, and the nation. All the hard work for 6 weeks paid off. After only 6 weeks, 1.4 billion people in China could gradually, over the next 6 weeks, go back to normal. Some people in Western countries get confused as to what human rights and democracy mean. For some, it means anarchy. China did a fantastic job and has already reaped the rewards. Well, thank you for that comment. Good to know. Maybe not how everyone feels the same way about it, but lockdowns are a complicated issue and controversial issue sometimes that people will study for years to come. For China, it seems to be making a big difference, though. And also, Twitter user Tommy says this: there are no saints in geopolitical games. There's only tit for tat. The West is no saints either, though it is regularly in danger of believing itself to be so. You do not insult a country and not face consequences. COVID-19 requires global cooperation. It is no time for tit for tat, obviously, as many believe. Now, this week, we are looking at how media is covering China's clean plate campaign, the push to stop wasting so much food. Sounds appetizing, right? It's more complicated than just that. Most people would agree that waste is bad. Regardless of what you are ordering or what you're eating at the restaurant, it is best not to order too much or let the leftovers be thrown away. But some media are framing China's anti-food waste campaign as something else. The latest move to clamp down on people's freedom or to prepare for an impending food crisis amid the trade tensions. Is that really the case? Before we get to this week's articles, though, a bit of background. It is no secret that Chinese people love to eat, and does this remind you of something or anything? And Chinese people, many of them, are generous and hospitable. Coming together for meals with family and friends is a time-honored tradition. To show appreciation, you often treat people to a meal, not unlike this. In Chinese culture, some people show respect to guests by providing, lots of dishes, sometimes more than they can eat. At the banquet or at a family dinner, if guests finish all the food, in fact, it could be interpreted and it could be perceived that the host is cheap and didn't order enough food and wasn't quite hospitable. So, and taking away food and taking leftovers home isn't that popular either, as so could be the case in the West. So that is the cultural context. And also there are numbers too. In China, back in the year 2015 alone, an estimated 17 to 18 million tons of food are discarded annually. They're wasted. An amount of food that can feed 30 to 50 million people for a whole year, according to a study by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and also the World Wildlife Fund. That is the population of Australia and New Zealand combined. Now, the city of Beijing alone generates 18,000 tons of domestic garbage per day, according to another food waste report. Now, live streaming of people binge eating have gone viral, and social media has inspired many to document their decadent dishes. But oftentimes, the food is used as a prop without being eaten. So perhaps it is fair to say that there is room for improvement. Plus, China is still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and face trade tensions, which might impact its pork and grain imports, not to mention the flooding in the south, which has damaged nearly 5 million hectares of crops as of August 26th. 5 million hectares, think about that. Last month, Chinese President Xi Jinping called for an end to wasting food and stressed the importance of being thrifty, being frugal, calling the issue of food waste shocking and distressing. Beijing highlighted the need to maintain a sense of crisis regarding food security, especially amid the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, China's central government has not made any new laws, but rather encouraged people to raise public awareness of this issue. Now, the campaign, of course, raises some interesting questions. What are the economic impact, for example, especially on people in the food industry? How does implementation really work? And given how connected food is to the Chinese people and the Chinese culture, how excited are people actually about being frugal when it comes to eating? Lots of food for thought, right? But when you look at how some media are reporting on the topic, a lot of those nuances are unfortunately swept away. For example, instead, the campaign is linked to authoritarianism or some kind of implementing food shortage. Let's take a look at some of them. Our first example comes from CNN, which on August 28th published the article, "In Authoritarian China, Eating Freely is a Cherished Activity. Now a food waste campaign wants to control meals too." Now, judging from this headline, the Chinese government is out to control what and where and how much people can eat. The article says a call from Beijing to reduce food waste has sent officials and businesses scrambling to find ways to stop people from ordering too much. And in some extreme examples, put meals under surveillance, meal times under surveillance. It lists examples of Shanghai officials asking residents to report food wasting behaviors. Food industry bosses urging diners to order at least one fewer dish than the number of people in their group. And of one restaurant in Hunan province that asked diners to weigh themselves before entering and to help them choose appropriate meals. Well, of course, the article apparently reached far and wide to come up with some of those more extreme examples out there. And for the restaurant in Hunan, in fact, they quickly apologized for weighing customers after it received criticism online and stopped those pre-meal weigh-ins. Surely, weighing customers before they eat was not what China intended, or was it? The article suggests that a lack of details in the Chinese president's speech has led to chaos and confusion when he says his directive lacked specifics, leaving it up to zealous officials and citizens across the nation to engineer sometimes drastic methods to tackle the issue. So how is the article suggesting that this directive is not authoritarian enough? It seems the central government is to blame for being too lax in the guidelines, but at the same time, authoritarian. That's a bit confusing. I mean, the article links the campaign to what they call growing surveillance and China's agricultural crisis. It sounds pretty scary. It quotes a few skeptical social media users who say they do not want to be restricted in how and how much they spend their money. Concerns like this are understandable, but surely there are some people who think wasting less food could be a good thing, right? Not one voice like this can be found in this article, though. There's also an analyst who says until the new campaign, eating was one of the few things people can freely do under China's authoritarian system. Rest assured, people in China are still allowed to eat what they want. It's really not the point. The bigger story here is that being responsible about how much we consume and waste is something all of us can consider, whether it's how big our carbon footprint is, or how much trash we can throw away, or how much food we can let go to waste in China and in other parts of the world too. As a CNN article points out, between 2013 and 2015, China wasted about 18 million tons of food each year. And when China's huge population of 1.4 billion is considered, the article says that's better than some Western countries per capita. China wastes about 72.4 pounds of food per year, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit's 2018 report. Australia tosses away 168 pounds of food every year per capita, while the United States is ranked lowest on the index at 209 pounds of food annually. So maybe the real question should not be about how authoritarian China's measures could be, but rather why are not some Western countries, some countries in other parts of the world, doing more to manage food waste? Now, our next report comes from The Guardian. On August 12th, they published the piece, Operating Empty Plate. Xi Jinping makes food waste his next target. Restaurant diners told to order one dish fewer than number of people under new system criticized as overtly controlling. Right away, the same message surfaced. Critics are calling the new system overtly controlling. Again, it is not the whole story. Couldn't the article include any positive sides of the story? Just maybe one voice of support? Perhaps not. The article instead emphasized the geopolitical and environmental factors that might strain China's food resources, such as weeks of mass flooding across the country wiped out the crops, contributing to rising food prices, already higher than after the COVID-19 outbreak paralyzed the Chinese economy. And it adds, faced with trade tensions with the United States and other countries, food security, always a priority for China, has become even more important. It is important to point out, though, that China is not in a food crisis. In fact, it had a bumper harvest, grain harvest, for 16 consecutive years, as you can see in this chart, with its grain output reaching almost 664 billion kilograms in 2019, in fact. But again, even when a country has enough grain supply, it's still important for people to perhaps fight against food waste. Another article talked about a new guideline that restaurants in Wuhan are trying out, which encourages customers to order one less dish than the number of people dining together. It quotes 3 social media users, all of whom expressed criticism about this measure. No voice of support. And for example, this user said, "Don't always take away from the people." And another said, "I especially hate this kind of political action and this level of control." And finally, the New York Times on August 21st published the piece titled, "Xi Declares War on Food Waste and China Races to Tighten Its Belt." The Communist Party's Clean Plate campaign targets live streaming extreme eaters wasteful diners, and others amid concerns about China's ability to feed its 1.4 billion people. Here we see the campaign tied to what the article called concerns over China's ability to feed its people. The article says that when it comes to food security, Mr. Xi said Chinese citizens should maintain a sense of crisis because of vulnerabilities exposed by the coronavirus pandemic. That is true, but this is not the first time, actually, China has taken aim at food waste. In 2013, another anti-food waste campaign was launched, which targeted government organizations. But you know what? An emphasis on diligence and thriftiness dates back thousands of years in the Chinese culture. Check out this poem by Li Shen from the Tang Dynasty that goes, very famous to some of the Chinese people overseas. 谁知盘中餐，粒粒皆辛苦, right? Know that every grain on the plate comes from hard work and perseverance of farmers. And in a work of ancient Chinese literature called Shangshu, which served as the foundation of Chinese political philosophy for over 2,000 years, it says something like 克勤于邦，克俭于家. Meaning something like full of toilsome earnestness in the service of the country and sparing in your expenditure on your family. It's about being frugal and being thrifty. Or in modern day terms, clean your plate. So the philosophy has been around much longer than the pandemic, trade tensions, or the floodings, to say in the headline that the campaign is all about China's concern that it cannot feed its people is perhaps overtly simplistic. One good thing, though, this article did is integrate feedback from different Chinese people. An older woman who says the campaign is brilliant, and a younger woman who says the campaign is boring and useless, and a restaurant owner who says he supports the cause, but the economic logistics are not so black and white. Indeed, the situation is multifaceted and complicated, and how people feel about changing their habits likely depends on who you talk to. Most media coverage does not seem to be interested in exploring these issues, at least when it comes to China. When France in 2016 made it a law that grocery stores must donate edible food instead of throwing it away, it was praised for being a leader in the fight against food waste. And when South Korea in 2016 implemented a regulation requiring citizens to pay the recycling fee for their food waste, they were praised for winning the battle against food waste. And when Italy in 2016 passed a law to limit food waste, making it easier to donate unsold food, reporting did not focus on authoritarianism or national food shortages at all. So how come when some countries take steps to curb food waste, they're praised as finding local solutions to this global problem, but when China takes steps and does similar things, it's labeled as overtly controlling? When we come back, I'll talk to my guests about all these issues and the media's coverage of the campaign and why it has drawn so much attention.
Hillary Radley has had a home in Vermont for 40 years. She's recently altered her daily routine. As of July 1st, she now collects all her food scraps for composting.
I can't understand why I didn't do it before, so I'm very for it. It's a simple thing to do. It obviously has great, long-term benefits, and it's not a lot to ask, I don't think.
It's something all Vermonters are now required to do.
The state of Vermont, which has long supported green initiatives, recently became the first state in the nation to outlaw food scraps from being thrown into the trash. Now, businesses and households have to collect those scraps for composting.
Food accounts for more than 20% of U.S. trash, making it the single largest component found in landfills. And as those food scraps rot, they release methane gas, one of the biggest contributors to climate change. Josh Kelly of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation says the new composting law hopes to alter people's relationship to food and make them think twice about wasting it.
It is across the country the single largest thing we waste. It's estimated that 40% of food is never even eaten. It's lost from the farm all the way to the fork.
Vermonters can drop off their scraps at facilities like Vermont Compost for free. The scraps are then blended with other farm materials like cow and horse manure. Then the chickens have a go at it. They first forage through it, then add their own manure to it.
At that point, we take the material, put it out into a pile, or in the industry we refer to it as a windrow, and that begins our process. And we manage that material for anywhere from 8 to 12 months. And then from there, it can go into some different blending phases, and essentially it all goes back to farms throughout the Northeast.
Kelly says this cycle can have a huge impact on reducing polluting elements from the environment.
When food waste is composted or fed to animals or not wasted, it is reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Vermont by as much as 9,000 cars taken off the road each year.
Vermont may be the first state to outlaw food scraps, but Kelly believes it won't be the last. He says increased awareness about the negative impact of food waste is causing a global rethink about food and what to do with its leftovers. Karina Huber for CGTN in Vermont. Hillary Radley has had a home in Vermont for 40 years. She's recently altered her daily routine. As of July 1st, she now collects all her food scraps for composting.
I can't understand why I didn't do it before, so I'm very for it. I mean, it's a simple thing to do. It obviously has great, long-term benefits, and it's not a lot to ask, I don't think.
It's something all Vermonters are now required to do.
The state of Vermont, which has long supported green initiatives, recently became the first state in the nation to outlaw food scraps from being thrown into the trash. Now, businesses and households have to collect those scraps for composting.
Food accounts for more than 20% of U.S. trash, making it the single largest component found in landfills. And as those food scraps rot, they release methane gas, one of the biggest contributors to climate change. Josh Kelly of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation says the new composting law hopes to alter people's relationship to food and make them think twice about wasting it.
It is across the country the single largest thing we waste. It's estimated that 40% of food is never even eaten. It's lost from the farm all the way to the fork.
Vermonters can drop off their scraps at facilities like Vermont Compost for free. The scraps are then blended with other farm materials like cow and horse manure. Then the chickens have a go at it. They first forage through it, then add their own manure to it.
At that point, we take the material, put it out into a pile, or in the industry we refer to it as a windrow, and that begins our process. And we manage that material for anywhere from 8 to 12 months. And then from there, it can go into some different blending phases, and essentially it all goes back to farms throughout the Northeast.
Kelly says this cycle can have a huge impact on reducing polluting elements from the environment.
When food waste is composted or fed to animals or not wasted, it is reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Vermont by as much as 9,000 cars taken off the road each year.
Vermont may be the first state to outlaw food scraps, but Kelly believes it won't be the last. He says increased awareness about the negative impact of food waste is causing a global rethink about food and what to do with its leftovers. Karina Huber for CGTN in Vermont. Hillary Radley has had a home in Vermont for 40 years. She's recently altered her daily routine. As of July 1st, she now collects all her food scraps for composting.
I can't understand why I didn't do it before, so I'm very for it. I mean, it's a simple thing to do. It obviously has great, long-term benefits, and it's not a lot to ask, I don't think.
It's something all Vermonters are now required to do.
The state of Vermont, which has long supported green initiatives, recently became the first state in the nation to outlaw food scraps from being thrown into the trash. Now, businesses and households have to collect those scraps for composting.
Food accounts for more than 20% of U.S. trash, making it the single largest component found in landfills. And as those food scraps rot, they release methane gas, one of the biggest contributors to climate change. Josh Kelly of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation says the new composting law hopes to alter people's relationship to food and make them think twice about wasting it.
It is across the country the single largest thing we waste. It's estimated that 40% of food is never even eaten. It's lost from the farm all the way to the fork.
Vermonters can drop off their scraps at facilities like Vermont Compost for free. The scraps are then blended with other farm materials like cow and horse manure. Then the chickens have a go at it. They first forage through it, then add their own manure to it.
At that point, we take the material, put it out into a pile, or in the industry we refer to it as a windrow, and that begins our process. And we manage that material for anywhere from 8 to 12 months. And then from there, it can go into some different blending phases, and essentially it all goes back to farms throughout the Northeast.
Kelly says this cycle can have a huge impact on reducing polluting elements from the environment.
When food waste is composted or fed to animals or not wasted, it is reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Vermont by as much as 9,000 cars taken off the road each year.
Vermont may be the first state to outlaw food scraps, but Kelly believes it won't be the last. He says increased awareness about the negative impact of food waste is causing a global rethink about food and what to do with its leftovers. Karina Huber for CGTN in Vermont.
Welcome back, guys. We have with us Vince Lu, founder of Chinese-based plant-based meat company Shen Meat, and also Victor Gao, chair professor at Suzhou University. Vince, Victor, welcome to both of you. First of all, let me ask both of you this question. Do you think the anti-food waste campaign is a worthy and worthwhile campaign, or is it too restrictive, too much? Victor, why don't I start with you?
Absolutely. I think food waste is the wrong thing to do. It is a sin, and I think it can even be criminalized. And the waste of food, which happens in period of abundance or period of famine, is both to be condemned. And I think it does not have to be related to whether there will be a famine year to be expected or not. In China, because of the large population base of 1.4 billion people, any waste of food should be discouraged and should be stopped. This does not impact upon the freedom of people. You can be free in any way, but you cannot waste food.
Vince, what do you think?
I believe it's a crucial time to launch this crucial campaign under this global pandemic area. So every year, 1.3 billion of tons of food is wasted globally and worldwide. And as China, we are one of the largest population nation in the country. We should take the responsibility of reducing food waste at this time.
But, Victor, you talk about the necessity of launching this campaign, but some would argue that China's economy is scrambling to make a comeback, and consumption, food consumption, dining out, buying grocery, is a big part of China's GDP, over 50%. Where's the balance between stimulating the economy, letting the economy recover, and curbing waste?
Now, I think these things belong to completely different categories. On the one hand, I think the government or the society can encourage everyone to go to restaurants, to spend, to consume. But on the other hand, wherever you consume, whatever you want to consume, it doesn't mean that you have the right to waste the food. You can claim, I paid for all the food I want to consume, and if I cannot consume, I can waste it. No, that's the wrong thing. That is the reason why I say to waste food is the wrong thing, and it's ethically it's wrong, morally it's wrong, and I hope eventually it can be wrong legally. We as a society should strongly discourage any waste of food. On the other hand, consumption of all kinds, legitimate in their nature, should be encouraged. I would encourage everyone to spend some money in restaurants, but don't waste food of any kind.
Well, Vincent, you run.
I have similar.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have similar opinion, and I want to mention that right now 30% of the global food production is actually wasted in the supply chain and in the restaurant because of the technology. And we've seen a lot of new AI companies that use AI or video recognition sensors to detect the supply chain about food waste and to increase the opportunity of how do we save food more technology. So I think the economy bounced up doesn't have to be related to anti-food waste, right? I think we can spend more money on food, and that doesn't mean we have to waste food.
Well, Victor, you know what the Western media have been talking about is the speculation that China is facing a food crisis, a food shortage. How do you look at those assertions?
Well, the first point I want to make is that to prohibit waste of food should be warning. That is, whether there will be expectation of famine or whether there will be expectation of many months or many years of bumper harvest, wasting food is not to be allowed. Secondly, for China with a population of 1.4 billion people, to provide steady supply of food of all kind to the population is always a challenge. In China, over the past several decades, China has been more or less being self-sufficient in the supply of food, even though China imports quite a lot of food. But that doesn't make China dependent on foreign import of food. On the other hand, I think any major disaster in food supply, including climate change, natural disasters of all kinds, or even worse, a man-made disaster like a war, for example, anywhere in the world, may cause disruption in food supply. That's why, in addition to whatever other things that the government and the society need to do, each citizen in China should really pick up the good habit of not wasting any food. That should be a must. It does not impinge upon liberty or freedom or human rights at all. Wasting food is not part of your freedom.
Right, Vince, you are in the food industry. Let me ask you this: many restaurants, of course, as emerge from the the COVID-19 crisis, they want to sell more dishes, and on the other hand, customers are somehow restricted, if not prohibited, from ordering more food. I mean, where's the balance between restaurants getting back to their businesses versus consumers eating what they want?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think business is business, right? If I'm a restaurant owner, I definitely want to make my growth and my revenue growth, right? So I think it's important people realize that they can, expense on more high quality food, especially in the restaurant, right? And they can increase their quality of food instead of wasting the quantity of food. Because under this era, we have seen a lot of people globally is still under poverty and under the condition of hunger. So it's not about people's right. It's about people's choice, especially consumers' choice, to spend your money more wisely and have a consciousness about saving food. And we are doing, as Jimmy, we're doing a plant-based meat business, which is rising globally right now. And from the technology side, the plant-based meat is more sustainable than animal meat production. So we have seen a lot of technology, a lot of new food or new genre of food actually enter this market to make people choice even more intelligent and make people have more choice on the supermarket or restaurant.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Vince, you run a plant-based meat company. So far, the anti-food waste campaign is more of a campaign culturally and socially than a new piece of legislation or an executive order per se. So how do you expect this wave of cultural campaign of anti-food waste impacting your company, your industry in particular?
I think in the mission side, we share the same mission. The mission about introduce plant-based meat into the market is to about sustainability. I think saving food is also another way to do to make consumer have a more sustainable idea in their mind. I think from the nationwide, this campaign really have to work because we have to save food and we have to make more people have enough food in the future, enough food supply in the future.
Well, Victor,
And as I mentioned,
Yeah.
there's a lot of way to do that from the technology side, from the marketing side, and of course from the nationwide, the campaign side.
Well, Victor, what about implementation? Because we see some, pretty ridiculous or unusual implementations out there. For example, the Hunan restaurant that weighs customers before and after they dine. How can you make sure that implementations are good at local levels?
Well, first of all, I think for this anti-food waste campaign to be really successful, everyone in China should be involved. No one should be left out. It doesn't mean that you are required to order one kind of food versus the other. No, whatever kind of food you order, you need to avoid practicing food waste. For example, you can order caviar, but if you throw away 90% of caviar as waste, for example, that should not be encouraged. And I think to really implement this policy, different restaurants, different societies, companies, institutions may come up with different ways. And I think the end game should be very simple. Eat or consume whatever you need, but don't waste food. And I think every family need to teach their family members and kids especially to practice this. Every school needs to be mobilized, and no one should be rewarded for wasting food. No one should be excused for saying, I paid for the food, so I can waste it, I can throw it away. You have no right to criticize or condemn me. No, that's wrong. I think wasting food should be considered as morally wrong, ethically wrong, and even legally wrong.
But Victor, the younger generation grew up eating, deliveries. They dine out. They don't really have memories of famines, back 50, 60 years ago. How can you persuade young people these days to, be frugal and be thrifty and not to waste food?
Now, first of all, I think no one should be allowed to waste food, and this apply older generation or younger generation. No one should be accepted. And further, when I traveled around in Europe or in the United States, for example, I come across many people wealthy in their circumstances, but never waste food. They just order whatever they need to consume, and they don't, for example, practice extravaganza and waste a lot of food, for example, because morally and ethically, as I said, that is the wrong thing to do. In China, wasting no food should be ingrained in everyone's mind, in their family values, in their ethical values, in their school tradition, etc. And eventually, I think this new habit, this new tradition should prevail, and all the Chinese people should participate in this very, very important campaign.
Well, Vince, you travel the world and deal with global customers too. Do you agree with Victor that many countries in the world actually they also do not practice extravaganza in the dinner tables?
Yeah, I think from the worldwide, from the global wide, I think the food waste is a huge problem. It's not only happening in China. It's not only happening in U.S. It's a lot of other countries also have the same problem. And as I mentioned before, I think technology to increase the supply chain intelligence is key to help us to save food, but also consumers' habit, right? Especially in Asian country, for China, for other Asian country, we have a lot of traditions, rituals, right? Or old habit. We have to celebration. We have to eat a lot of food to show our mians, to show our face, right? So I think that's a huge problem. But in younger generation, I believe people can transform their idea about how to show their face. not wasting food is just not a choice.
Well, Victor, finally, Western media have been talking about China's anti-waste campaign. We covered some of their reports. Many of their narratives are such that, this is very controlling. It's an authoritarian society. They speculate that China is in a very dire food crisis. But when Italy or other countries or South Korea have this anti-waste campaigns, the narratives were different. Is there a double standard here?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, some of these Western media reports are barking at the wrong tree. Secondly, no one should be allowed to indulge in fantasy that wasting food is part of the human rights or is part of democracy. No, that's completely wrong. Wasting food is not part of human rights. It's not part of your family tradition, for example. And in China, as well as in anywhere else, wherever there is mankind existing, anywhere in this world, wasting food should not be encouraged. Wasting food should be punished, on the other hand. And I think China needs to really encourage everyone in this country to practice no wasting of food, clean plate, as we call it. And as for other waste of food in the distribution, logistics sector, etc., I think they need to be taken care of by other ways. But if we focus on the consumption of food by individual, by families, by corporations, etc., wasting food should be really treated as morally, ethically, and legally wrong thing to do.
Vince, any final thoughts on this anti-food waste campaign in China?
I think besides the campaign side, I think I agree with Victor. There's have to be some restriction, because we have seen in China about the restriction about the plastic straw, and it has actually be a good example in some like larger brands, Starbucks, KFC. They all launched their anti-plastic straw, right, to obey this restriction. So if the campaign have to work, there must be strong restriction about wasting food and have to be penalty involved, so people will know the consequences. So people will have a more idea and just awareness about saving food, and wasting food is just not a choice in their habit.
All right, Vince Liu, founder of Chinese plant-based meat company Shen Meat, and Victor Gao, chair professor at Suzhou University. Thank you both so very much. And that would do it for this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing, sitting in for Lucian. Keep your comments and suggestions coming, and we might read out some of them. And that would do it for this edition. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Really something that worth thinking about. We don't think about it, right? We order food delivery. It's so convenient. 30 minutes at your doorstep. But is immoral. All right, it is. Free Will said is what the headline. Oops. I think I clicked the wrong button. Oops.
It's okay. Maybe some Twitter or. Okay. Actually.
Yeah, right
yeah.
here. Some comments.
Yeah, actually, I.
Okay. Yes, Jessica Liu said yes, full support, food security is utmost important. I agree. I mean, I can't agree more. And also this friend called Richard Thomas Lindo Francesco said, I praise the food waste law imposed by China. Please don't pay attention to detractors. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Francesco. Jesus Andres Gonzalez Torres said, food is food. How? Oh, wow. I'm not sure what you're talking about, my friend, but thank you for the comment. Anyways. Giovanni Luca says, overconsumption can cause destabilization with people in a country between rich and poor. Yes, indeed. Julie Faye Newton said, it's very sad. Well, do you mean it's sad to waste food? Alrighty. So lots of comments. Keep them coming. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. And thank you, Xiaojin, for being here today.
Thanks for your hard work. Also.
Sure. It's always a pleasure. A pleasure.
Actually, I totally agree with Victoria's what said. Yeah, he said we should not reward of those wasting foods people. Yeah.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thank you very much. Until next time, take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.